My name is Dakota Wells, and the night my father broke me wasn't on a battlefield. It was at my sister's wedding. He lifted his glass, smiling that perfect crowd-pleasing smile. Dakota works with radios, he said. At least she's safe behind a desk. People laughed, cameras flashed, and I stood there, frozen, every muscle tight from years of pretending his words didn't sting. That's the thing about my father. He never raised his hand to hurt me. He just used his voice. Sharp, public, precise. But before I could leave, someone else rose from the table. The groom, a Navy SEAL. His voice cut through the silence. "Sir, with all due respect, that woman saved my life." The room went dead quiet, and for the first time in my life, my father's mouth stayed shut. The applause rolled through the room like a tide I didn't belong to. Crystal chandeliers shimmered over white linens, the scent of roses thick in the air. My father stood center stage, his voice filling the hall with ease, the kind of voice that could turn even a lie into entertainment. He raised his glass, flashing that charming grin people always mistook for warmth. He toasted the happy couple first, Casey and Dylan, before his gaze found me across the tables. That pause was enough for my stomach to tighten. Then came the joke, the kind that sounded harmless to everyone but me. Laughter rippled around us, and I smiled back. Tight, polite, the same smile I'd worn my whole life when he used me as a punchline. My knuckles ached from how hard I gripped the water glass. He kept talking, oblivious to the way my silence was splintering. I counted my breaths, willing my face to stay still. "You learn that in the military. Control what you can, ignore what you can't." Then a calm, steady voice broke through the noise. "Sir, with all due respect, that's not true." The room froze. Dylan Reeves, the groom, stood tall in his dress uniform, his tone clear and sharp as command. He turned toward me. "That woman saved my life." The microphone slipped from my father's hand, the metallic clang slicing through the silence. Every pair of eyes shifted toward me, waiting. I stood, nodded once, and met Dylan's gaze. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing left to say. I left the reception just as the band shifted into "At Last." No one tried to stop me. Casey's eyes followed me, red and glassy. My father stood frozen near the microphone that had rolled to the floor, the symbol of his control lying mute at his feet. By morning, my phone was lit up with messages. "You overreacted. It was just a joke. Everyone knew that. You embarrassed me in front of family." I deleted them one by one until the screen went black again. Then I opened my banking app. Cancel recurring transfer. For 3 years, I had wired him $1,500 every month to help keep the Wells Ranch from foreclosure, a property he called the family's legacy. When the notification flashed, "Transaction canceled successfully," a strange calm washed over me. For the first time, I felt unchained. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, Austin's air dry and warm. The hum of passing cars blurred into the memory of a sandstorm, Balad Air Base. Iraq. The radar jammed, visibility gone, and I had one helicopter left with fuel to make a single run. 6 men were trapped. I still remember the static on the radio, the heavy breathing, the voice that cut through chaos. Steady, low, unshaken. "Roger, we'll hold." Back then, I didn't know their names, only that they were waiting on my signal to live. Now I did. The voice that night belonged to my sister's new husband, the man my father once said I saved by sitting in air conditioning. I laughed softly to myself, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Some truths don't need to hurt anymore. They just stop surprising you. Within 3 days, the internet had devoured the story. The clip titled "Navy SEAL Salutes Bride's Sister" hit 2 million views. Morning shows replayed my father's smirk, Dylan's correction, and my silence. The caption read, "Air Force officer humiliated by father, honored by SEAL son-in-law." I turned the TV off. The phone rang again. "Linda," she whispered. Your father's miserable. He can't stand being called a bad dad. I asked her quietly. Did he feel miserable when he humiliated me in front of everyone? She didn't answer. The line went dead. Later that afternoon, a journalist reached out for an interview. I declined. An hour after that, a message came from Maxwell Air Base. HQ wants to talk to you. For a moment, my stomach clenched. I thought I was being reprimanded. Instead, they commended how I'd handled myself, no statements, no drama, and offered a transfer to Florida. A new assignment in Pensacola to develop a joint air-sea coordination program. I said yes, without hesitation, not to escape, but to breathe somewhere that didn't worship appearances more than integrity. That evening, as I packed, a final email from my father appeared. So you're really walking away from this family? I stared at the words, then typed back slowly. No, Dad. I'm walking away from the version of it that never felt real. Then I shut the laptop. The hum of the city outside faded, replaced by a silence that, for the first time, felt entirely mine. 3 days after leaving Texas, I flew back to Maxwell to close out my transfer paperwork. News of the wedding hadn't died down. It had multiplied, spreading across headlines and hashtags. My father's voice, Dylan's correction, my silence. It was everywhere. The internet had turned me into the humiliated daughter who saved a Navy SEAL. I didn't want attention. I wanted peace. When the plane landed, my phone vibrated nonstop. A new email blinked from the Air Force Public Affairs Office asking to verify the incident. I typed my reply slowly. No comment. I did my job. That's all. 2 days later, I caught my father's face on live TV. He looked polished, rehearsed, damage control disguised as pride. He told the reporter he was proud, that it had all been a misunderstanding. When asked if he knew about my commendations, he laughed lightly, said, I think she mentioned it once, but I don't recall the details. I shut the television off. Not angry, just hollow. The way he said she instead of my daughter cut sharper than anything else. That night, Linda called. Her voice trembled. He's falling apart, she said. They pulled his contracts. He says only you can fix this. I stared out the window, the glow of the runway lights cutting through the dark. I've saved people from gunfire. Linda, I can't save him from his own ego. Then I hung up. By the end of the week, an email arrived from command headquarters. I'd been promoted to lieutenant colonel and assigned to spearhead a new joint air-sea coordination program in Pensacola. It meant leaving Texas entirely, its gossip, its ghosts. I laughed quietly to myself. My father would probably have to Google what an O5 was. A final message arrived minutes later, from Dylan Reeves. If you need me to testify, I'll do it. Not for family, for honor, I typed back. No need. There's already enough noise. I'd rather keep the silence. I arrived in Pensacola at the edge of spring. The air tasted of salt and new beginnings. My apartment overlooked the runway. I'd chosen it for the sound of jet engines at dawn. A reminder that every day, someone was brave enough to take off again. Work consumed me quickly. The Joint Tactical Coordination Program was ambitious. 12 officers learning to make life or death calls in real time. On my first day in the simulator room, their eyes followed me nervously as I began the briefing. You're here to make decisions when you have no time to think, I told them. Calm isn't instinct, it's a skill. A young lieutenant, Harper, raised her hand. Ma'am, how do you know your decision's the right one? I smiled. You don't. You make the best call you can with what you know, and you live with the outcome. That night, Casey texted, Dad's breaking down. Everyone's avoiding him. He says he's sorry, I replied. He's not sorry. He's scared. The next day, Dylan called. His voice was steady but careful. Richard asked me to convince you to talk to him. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the line of horizon where ocean met sky. Tell him I'm not 12 anymore. No one needs to convince me to forgive. He paused, then said, I just wanted to thank you. I'm alive because of you. You're not in debt to me. I said softly. I was doing my job. Later, while unpacking, I found an old photo, my mother and father beside a rusted truck. She was smiling, gentle. He was tilting his chin upward, angling himself toward the light. On the back, her handwriting read, "Don't talk louder, just stay calm." The same words I'd spoken to my students that morning. I realized then that the calm in me had never come from him. It was hers all along. After dark, I ran along the Pensacola shoreline, the hum of engines mixing with the waves. My phone buzzed, my father's name on the screen. I stopped, let it ring until it went silent, then turned the sound off. Sometimes not answering is the only way to be heard. I never liked ceremonies. They praised victories, but never mentioned the cost. Still, when the Veterans Gala in Pensacola asked me to speak on Calm Under Fire, I couldn't refuse. The ballroom overlooked the Gulf, uniforms crisp, medals gleaming under soft lights. When my name was called, I walked to the stage, my steps measured and quiet. Service isn't about glory, I said. It's about precision, patience, and faith. When the world is burning, your job isn't always to fight the fire. It's to keep your voice steady so others can move. The room fell silent. I spoke of the sandstorm in Iraq, the mission that almost failed, the night I was just a voice guiding strangers home. Leadership isn't always loud. Then the lights flickered. At the back row sat Richard Wells. Dark suit, eyes lowered. He wasn't invited. Maybe Casey told him? Maybe he needed to see. My pulse quickened, but my voice stayed even. Sometimes, silence saves lives. Applause came, soft, respectful. Later, on the balcony, I felt the sea breeze mixing with the low hum of jets. Behind me, his voice broke the wind. Dakota, I don't know what to say, but now I understand why they call you Echo 7. I wish I'd known sooner. Better late than never. I said. We stood there, no anger left, just quiet. Before leaving, he handed me an envelope. I wrote this before I came. He said, "You don't have to read it." I nodded, watching him disappear into the night as the flag outside fluttered in the wind. For 3 days. The envelope stayed unopened beside my coffee mug. Hold steady. Then an email came from Dylan. Casey said your speech was incredible. Your father told me. For the first time, I didn't need to be the one holding the mic. I opened the letter that night. His handwriting was careful, deliberate. I made jokes to hide fear. Fear that you didn't need me. I was right, you don't. But I still hope one day you'll let me listen. I folded the pages. No tears, just calm. The phone rang. Casey. Dad wants to visit the base, she said. He wants to see what you really do. I looked at the letter, then at the dark ocean beyond the window. All right, I said. Once. Outside, a training jet crossed the night sky. Lights blinking steady, the hum constant and sure. Still holding steady, I whispered. He arrived on a bright morning, sunlight spilling across the tarmac. His old pickup stopped just beyond the security gate of Pensacola Base. The paint faded, the bed dented. The sea wind whipped the American flag above the main post. I waited by the fence line in full dress blues, shoes polished until they caught the light. When he stepped out, he hesitated before smiling. You look more like your mother than ever. So I've been told. I said evenly. I led him through the training compound. Inside the simulation bay, young officers worked through mock rescue drills, radio chatter, emergency codes, maps flashing red. When I entered, they rose as one. Ma'am! Their voices carried a rhythm of precision. My father's eyes widened. You command all of them? No, I said. I teach them how to command themselves. He stayed quiet as I ran the next exercise. A stranded search team, failing comms, 8 minutes left on the clock. My tone stayed even, giving orders, adjusting flight paths, counting seconds. When the system beeped mission success, the room erupted in applause. He stood motionless, the noise fading around him. Then softly, he asked, "You're not afraid, knowing lives depend on you?" I met his eyes. "You taught me never to show weakness. I just learned to use it differently." We ate afterward in the mess hall, cold cuts, black coffee, no ceremony. The silence between us no longer carried disdain, only respect. Before he left, he placed a metal mug on the table. The words, "Hold steady," were engraved across it. "Dylan sent this," he said. He told me that voice kept him alive. My fingers brushed the steel, and the weight I'd carried for years finally eased. As his truck rolled away, I watched the taillights vanish beyond the gate. For the first time, I didn't see the man who'd hurt me, just one trying, finally, to be a father. A year passed quietly, the kind of year that doesn't announce itself, just unfolds. Steady and sure. My rank changed to lieutenant colonel, but life at Pensacola stayed the same. Classes, drills, the hum of engines over the bay. Somewhere along the line, I realized that teaching others how to stay calm wasn't just training them, it was retraining me. Each morning, I stood before my students and repeated the same truth I'd learned the hard way. Control isn't about silence, it's about choice. Then, slowly, something shifted. Every month, my father called, not to apologize, not to relive the past, just to listen. He'd ask small questions: if I was flying, if I'd been sleeping enough, if the sea air ever got too heavy. I answered simply, without resentment. We spoke like two people who had both been broken in different ways, neither trying to win anymore. For the first time, our silence wasn't a wall, it was a bridge. One afternoon, I supervised the final test for Lieutenant Harper. She guided her rescue team through a simulated blackout, cool, decisive, unshaken. When it ended in success, the room burst into quiet pride. Harper turned, tears bright in her eyes, and threw her arms around me. "Ma'am, I'm not afraid anymore." I smiled. "Fear's a compass," I told her. "It only matters that you know which way it's pointing." That evening, a sealed envelope waited on my desk from the command office. Inside was a copy of a letter forwarded from Air Force headquarters. I used to look down on people like my daughter. Now I understand. This country stands because of those who serve without applause. Signed, Richard Wells, father of Lettie, Cole, Dakota Wells. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. My smile came not because he called me his daughter, but because, for once, he got the words right. Later that night, when I returned to my apartment, a small box sat by the door. Casey's handwriting covered the label. Inside was a photo of her newborn son, tiny and red-faced, wrapped in a navy blanket. Beneath it, a note. "Meet Evan Dakota Reeves." I set the picture beside the metal mug that read, "Hold steady." The two seemed to belong together. One from the past, one from whatever comes next. For the first time in years, my home didn't feel like a place I was staying in between missions. It felt like a life I'd finally earned. Late afternoon, the wind swept across the runway, carrying salt and sunlight together. The Florida sky deepened into amber and violet as the training squadron taxied into formation. 4 jets lifted off in perfect unison, slicing through the horizon like arrows drawn by patience. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Casey. "Dad says hello. He just watched a feature about your base. He told me he hears your voice now in every engine that takes off." I stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up. The jets were already climbing, their roar fading into a steady hum. I closed my eyes and listened, not just to the sound, but to the stillness beneath it. Sometimes, the best thing you can say is nothing at all. I walked toward the security fence and rested my hands on the cold steel. Beyond it, the runway shimmered under the setting sun. Planes disappeared into a low curtain of clouds, leaving faint white trails that dissolved almost as quickly as they appeared. I thought of the last time my father held a microphone, and the first time he chose silence instead. It had taken him a lifetime, maybe a war of his own, to learn what listening really meant. The air smelled of jet fuel and ocean spray, familiar and grounding. I spoke quietly to the empty sky. I used to chase recognition. Now I just listen to the engines and know I did the right thing. The jets were only specks now, fading against the orange glow. The wind carried their echo long after they vanished. I reached for the metal mug on the railing, fingers tracing the engraved words that had followed me through every storm. Hold steady. A soft smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I whispered it once more, barely audible beneath the wind. Still holding steady, the final shot would have caught it all. The wind rising, the flag snapping above the base, the horizon bleeding gold into dusk. A woman in uniform standing alone by the flight line, silent yet certain. Not a soldier searching for approval anymore, but someone who had finally found peace in the sound of engines fading into the sky.